Hey guys, I am Akash Sharma and I'm going to be the trainer for the curriculum of Certified Ethical Hacker version 11. So let's get started. Alright, so let's begin with our curriculum. So CEH have 20 modules in total, which consist of 40 hours of training duration. In this lecture, we are going to discuss a few topics and concepts from the same curriculum. The topics will be starting from introduction. There will be CIA triads. We'll discuss about networking fundamentals, wherein we discuss a little bit about OSI model, the three-way handshake, IP addresses, what are they, and how they work, and the types of DNS records. I'll be just giving you some basic information on how they work, what are those, and the definitions. Further, we'll continue with some attack types like backdoors and man in the middle. We'll also discuss some basic Linux commands. I'll be giving you like a practical demonstration on a Linux machine, how to use it, what commands we'll be using in the further sessions as well. And we also have a topic of network security where we'll be talking about firewalls, different types of firewalls, how they work and how they are configured and everything. So let's get started with it. So before we begin learning what is CEH and the other cool concepts about it, let's discuss what is cybersecurity. As per a definition, cybersecurity is a practice of securing and protecting computers. We all know that by the term security means that we are going to add some protection, right? So cybersecurity is all about protecting your data, protecting your entities which exist in your technical ecosystem. We are going to implement some of the some protection layers which we'll be discussing step by step in the further curriculum. The protection is always against a malicious actor. This threat actor, as we call it, can be a hacker, can be a malware, can be a ransomware, as you might have heard about. So the main goal is just to protect the sensitive information and the privacy and the data. So this is all we're going to deal with in cybersecurity. Whenever we're going to talk about any concept, this is going to be the main goal. That is the protection of your entities, whatever you have in your technical ecosystem. Cybersecurity is a very important topic these days, especially because our almost everything is working on some or the other digital technology. Let that be your cell phones, your iPads, even your cars and your refrigerators, your toasters, could be anything literally. Even there are pens, your regular stationery, which is also connecting to your Wi-Fi now. So cybersecurity is implemented everywhere in every ecosystem. Let that be healthcare, let that be from the government sector, that could be of course from telecom and IT, it's very obvious. Could be energy and utilities. In nuclear power plants, cybersecurity is very important. In education also, cybersecurity is like on a very graphical raise, because governments are now also implementing rules and regulations where they are also encouraging students to learn cybersecurity so that they can proceed for a career in that as well. So cybersecurity is important. So when we talk about cybersecurity, there is this CIA triad that is very important to understand. So I'll explain you what is CIA basically. CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are basically three primary goals of every cybersecurity practice that we carry out and we are going to learn about in this curriculum. So what is CIA? These are some definitions for these three terminologies. Confidentiality means private or confidential information should not be disclosed to unauthorized individuals. So in an organization, when data is taken into consideration, it must be sure that it is not shared with anyone who is not having the proper authority. Integrity means information or systems should be protected from intentional, unauthorized, or accidental changes. Integrity means however data is stored, it should be in the same format unless it is changed with any kind of authoritative or administrative permissions. Availability means systems or information must be available on demand according to agreed upon parameters. That means there should be backups, there should be restore points for whatever data that you want to access. So these three principles should always be considered whenever we are working with security implementations. So this is the basic of CIA triad, and this is important if you're working as an analyst, if you're working as a security researcher, contributor, then you should know about this. Now let's begin our curriculum with networking fundamentals. Networking is very important because it defines the communication between two devices in a network, in your ecosystem, in your home, in your office, wherever you are. If you are connected to a wireless communication, you are a part of a network. Now, network security is very important. Before we get into network security, we need to understand the fundamentals, basically how a network works, what is the architecture, and what are the components of network. So there is this thing called OSI model. Okay, it's short for Open Systems Interconnection. This was adopted as a standard model for network communication to facilitate interoperability between network devices independent of the manufacturer. That means no matter what is the manufacturer, if it is your cell phone, it's your smartphone, it's your iPhones, Androids, whatsoever, this be your laptop, anything that connects to a network communication ecosystem, it is going to be a part of this OSI model. Now, it has 7 layers. It is very important to understand this OSI model if you are getting into, let's say, cybersecurity, or maybe in network communications. If you're becoming a network analyst, you should know about OSI model. So OSI is made of 7 layers that are separated into 2 groups. We have it here. I have denoted them with the color combination here. The first 3 layers specify how end station application will communicate with one another. That means once all the data transaction is done, how are the end station applications going to react to it, respond to it. The last 4 levels determine how data is sent from end to end. From physical layer to transport layer, it is going to determine that how exactly data is being sent. From session layer to application, it's going to work on the application level, like on the user end, how it's going to respond, right? I'm going to explain them in the further slides as well. So these are the 7 layers, these are the definition. Let's talk about every single layer one by one. Physical layer, this layer defines the physical connection between a computer and a network. Like what kind of connection is actually there? Is there an ETH, or is there any other kind of connection that is available? In data link layer, the layer is in charge of converting packets from network layer into appropriate format for transmission. So like it basically converts the proper formats of whatever data is being sent. It takes the packet from the network layer. Now on network layer, it is in charge of adding data routing and addressing information, like where the packet is being sent, what is the address. Address resolution basically takes place at network layer, you can say in short. Transport layer, this layer is responsible for end-to-end transmission and segmentation of data stream. Session layer, that is in layer number 5, it is responsible for establishing, maintaining and terminating communication sessions between two computers. So let's say if I connect from A to B, there is like a authenticated session that is established. So this session layer will monitor the maintenance of this session, if it is authenticated or not, if it is initiated or terminated, or it's on hold, or whatsoever happens, it happens on the session layer. On the presentation layer, this layer is in charge of converting data from application layer into a format that can be understood by any system. So it basically takes whatever data is being sent or received by application layer and it converts it into a format which can be understood by any system. Let that be a system based on Linux, that be Unix or Windows or whatsoever. On the application layer is in charge of interacting with the protocol stack via user applications, network services or operating system. This is where you as a user act. This is where you come in action. That whatever you are working with an application, if it's connecting with a network, this is where it's going to basically interoperate with the rest of the network layer services. So these are 7 layers of the OSI model. It's a very, I can even go on and on like for hours explaining every single layer and the functionality and the components involved. But for a fundamental information, I think this much is very enough. Now let's talk about a three-way handshake. When we talk about data transactions, there is this transaction of functionality called three-way handshake. Three-way handshake is a connection established between a client and a server before transferring any kind of data. Before you transfer any data, this is like a connection established. How? I will tell you how. So the client asks the server if it wants to set up a connection. So the client is sending a request basically to the server that do you want to connect or not? And the server responds, yeah, sure, I would love to connect, right? Then in the third step, when the client receives the response, it sends a packet to the server to acknowledge that connection is open now. So there is a request, then there is a surety, like a confirmation, and then there is an acknowledgement that yes, I received a confirmation. So this is a simple three-way handshake. When the client receives the response, it sends a packet to the server, acknowledge that the connection is now open. It also sends a SYN packet. SYN is for synchronizing with the server basically. Then the server sends back an acknowledgement message called SYN-ACK. That means if you are synchronizing with me, I am acknowledging that you are synchronized. So SYN is for synchronization. SYN-ACK is for synchronization acknowledgement. SYN-ACK is sent by the server when SYN is sent by the user. Once an acknowledgement packet is received from the server, the user also sends an acknowledgement that yes, okay, fine, I received it, yay. So this is like a very basic level of a robotic communication. If you communicate with a robot, it will respond to every single thing that you say, right? If you say that do this, then it's going to respond that okay, I'm going to do it, right? It's not a human communication that we just communicate with emotions or expressions. Here there is a proper functionality to do it, and that functionality is with the help of these packets, and these packets are namely as SYN, SYN-ACK, and ACK, that is ACK. So this is how a three-way handshake works. First, a response is sent, it's received as a confirmation, and then there is an acknowledgement that is being sent as well. Similar happens for the synchronization as well. A SYN packet is sent, then a synchronized acknowledgement packet is sent, and then there is a final acknowledgement. So this was the basic of SYN-ACK. Once a TCP connection is set between two devices, the protocol ensures that all data is transferred. So the final stage after all the communication and handshakes and everything is the connection establishment. That actually confirms your connection is established. So every time you connect with your Wi-Fi, right, this is all what happens in the backend. Your device connects with the router, your modem, and this all packet transaction takes place, and that is when your connection is established. It happens like with a blink of an eye maybe, or maybe a little more, I am exaggerating, but yeah, that's all what happens in the backend. And once connection is established, you receive the signals or whatsoever the services are there. Okay. Moving forward, that was three-way handshake, like very easy to understand, and we just covered it like in seconds. There is a lot more involved in it, trust me. There are different components of TCP IP, and then you have to understand like how the different types of TCP connections, but I'm not going in that depth. I'm explaining you the fundamentals of it. This term IP address is very, very vaguely used by a lot of people. IP address is just an identifier for a computer. Like you have a name, you have an address where you live. If you have to introduce yourself to a person in real life, then you have to give your identification, right? Your identification is your name, that my name is Akash Sharma and I live in Delhi and so place. So that's my IP address basically in real life. In a network ecosystem, every device have a specific ID. It's a hexadecimal ID that is given to it, assigned to it from the DHCP server of your routers. DHCP is a dynamic host configuration protocol, which actually assigns an IP address to a particular device. I'm not going to go in detail how DHCP works, but that's an IP address in short. Each computer known as a host on the internet has at least one IP address that uniquely identifies it from all the other computers on the internet. So this is going to be a unique identification on the internet. If you are using internet, you are going to get an IP address from your provider to whomsoever you connect. Even in a local network, if you're not connected to internet, if you're connected in a local network of your devices, you are still going to get an IP address, but that IP address will be assigned from your router, from your modem, or whatever device you connect with. Right, so that's how it actually works. So this is IP address in short, okay? Now, let's understand IANA, that is short for Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, okay? It is a non-profit private American corporation, so it oversees global IP addresses allocation, okay? So globally, whatever IP addresses are allocated to anyone, it is assigned and overseen by IANA. Autonomous system number allocation, DNS root zone management, and other internet protocol related symbols and internet numbers. Basically, whatever happens on the internet, whatever IP allocations or DNS root zone managements or anything that is related to your address resolution, that is governed and overseen by IANA. This is the organization who handles it. Just in case if you're asking like who's going to give me IP address, they're going to give you the IP address, okay? So these are the people who are giving you the IP address on internet, okay? On a local network, you're going to get that from your router, not from IANA, of course. But on the global network, this is how it's going to work. All right. So that was IP address and who gives it basically, and we covered a couple of topics like real fast. So now we're going to talk about types of DNS. So what is DNS? DNS is domain name system. There are total 8 types of DNS. A record, AA record, CNM record, MX, NS, SRV, TXE, and SOA. SOA is not a very renowned one, but I'm still gonna tell that. Okay, so A record is a host name and its matchmaking IP v4 address are stored in an address mapping record, that is A record, also known as the DNS host record. So the host name and its IP address is stored in this record, okay? So if you have a domain that, let's say akashsharma.com, then its record of its IP address is going to store in this A record. That is the address mapping record. That's short for it. These screenshots, by the way, are from GoDaddy. Just if somebody is curious. Okay, moving forward, we have AAAA record. 4 A's. I don't know how to say it. Okay, IPv6 addresses are stored in this one, okay? So if a host name is allocated an IPv6 address, then it is stored in this record, AAA. Alright. CNAME record is canonical name record and can be used to alias a host name to a different host name, right? We have MX record, it's mail exchanger record, and it specifies and prioritizes the incoming mail servers that receive email messages sent to your domain name. So if there is any kind of email transaction happening, MX record is going to handle that for you. NS record is name server record. It specifies that a DNS zone such as bytecyberlabs.com is delegated to a specific authoritative name server and provides the address of the name server. SRV record, service record, basically. SRV is short for service. It is a resource record used to identify computers that host particular services such as FTP. So if there is like a service that is involved like FTP or SSH or any other one, so SRV record is going to like identify what exact host is having that service installed. So that's what SRV record is going to do. TXT record is machine readable data such as opportunistic encryption, sender policy framework, DKIM or DMARC records are saved in TXT or carried by TXT, or you can say. SOA is state of authority. This identifies the base DNS information about the domain, basically like just DNS details, nothing much. That is why it is like not a lot of people talk about it, but yeah, just to let you know. Alright, so these were 8 types of DNS records. If we go into in-depth information and details of how to configure them, how to secure them, what are the vulnerabilities they might face, so I can go on like for maybe a couple of hours explaining you the mitigations for them as well, but we are just going to go with the fundamentals here. Let's talk a little bit about different attack types. So we always heard about malwares, we have already heard about viruses, trojans and whatnot. So these are some malicious actors that can be programmed by any skilled computer hacker who knows a couple of programming languages maybe, and they can create these kind of stuff. One thing that a lot of people talk about but they didn't really understand, or maybe you have heard about this thing called backdoor. If you're living in a house with an exit that is separated from your main entry, that's a backdoor. Basically it's an escape route for you, right? Like an emergency exit in malls and shopping complexes and stuff. So backdoor is a mechanism for gaining access to a computer that bypass or circumvents the standard authentication method. I can explain it this way, like let's say username and password are a mandatory thing when you're logging into Facebook. So if there is any third way that I have created to authenticate myself into Facebook, that's a backdoor. In a nutshell, that can be a good explanation. That you have found another way of bypassing or circumventing the standard authentication protocol. So that's a backdoor. Another thing, it's a very common term that is man in the middle. It actually kind of self-explanatory, but I will explain you how that works. And it's a very common attack actually. If you're traveling in a metro or you are having your snacks at McDonald's or KFC, this might happen to you because you are in the public, connected to a public Wi-Fi. This can actually happen to you. It's very easy and yet dangerous. So man in the middle attack is one of the attack in which the attacker secretly intercepts and relay messages between two parties. So party A and party B are like communicating with each other, but the man in the middle attack can intercept between that connection and see whatever you are, transacting with each other. Whatever data is being sent and received, this can be intercepted by a third person, third party actor. In this case, we call them a hacker, right? So it's a very simple form of attack, and if I go into the practical of it, it's very easy to perform as well. It's, of course, to explain it will take a long time. I'm not going to go in depth, but that's a man in the middle attack. That is why people are being informed that you should not do, transactions or do any kind of financial transaction on a public Wi-Fi, especially because if there is a man in the middle attack, your details and your data is at a very high risk. Otherwise, you can connect and you can do whatever stuff you want, but not something that can be financially targeted. So yeah, that's man in the middle. So these were two attack types I wanted to explain in this lecture. MITM basically makes impossible for legitimate user to access services or information. It succeeds when attacker sends more requests to a server than the server can handle. This can also be categorized as DOS attack. DOS attack is short for denial of service. Now, denial of service is an attack where you send so many number of packets to a server that the server can't really handle. So it just stops responding to you. 404 not found is a very common web response you might have seen when you visit a website, that sometimes it does not open. That means the server is crashed. Either you also see 502, 503, that means the server is not responding. So these error codes basically denotes what is actually happening with the server. It's like communication way from your browser to server, that how they actually respond to it. So in DOS attacks, in denial of service attack, the main goal is just to crash the service, right? So the attacker basically stops and halt the service. It's just a destructive functionality, so it's not something legitimate, of course. So yeah, that's DOS attack. Okay. So next, after understanding all these conceptual details about DNS and network and some attack types we also saw, let's move forward to what is more important to learn, that is Linux. When we are working in cybersecurity, we need to understand system architecture thoroughly. We have been using Windows for a very long period of time. I'm pretty sure you must be like using it for a long time, but it is important to understand that Windows is not just what we use, but we also have to understand the authentications and different security measures that can be implemented there as well. But Linux is very important to learn, because if you don't know Linux, you really cannot excel that good in cybersecurity. It is a very basic mandatory thing that you have to learn. So I'm going to show you basics of Linux. I'm going to show you some basic commands that we can operate in Linux and how Linux work. There is a very, broad spectrum variety of Linux there. There is this thing called distributions. There are different flavors of Linux basically. Like we have in security domain, we use Kali Linux, we use Parrot OS, but there are different other flavors as well, like Mint, there is Ubuntu, right? So there are many others as well. So I'm going to show you some commands how to work in Linux, and so let's get started with the practicals here. Alright, so let's proceed with our practical. Alright, this is how Linux actually looks. This is Kali Linux that I'm using. Kali Linux is a very advanced form of Linux with hybrid tools that are used for security testing. Various kind of functionalities are already included in this. It is one of the best one for security researchers. In Linux, major transactions or functionality executions and everything is done with the help of this terminal. Terminal is going to be your one best friend when you're using Linux, okay? It is very important to understand at how to use terminal and how to execute commands to use Linux efficiently. I'm not going to go in depth of Linux, that how it basically works on a very architectural level, but I'm just going to show you and demonstrate a few commands so you can get an idea like how Linux operates and what kind of things you can do with Linux basically. When you log into Kali Linux, when you first open the terminal, basically you are in the home directory of your user. If you are a root user, if you're a normal user, whatsoever you are, so you are in the home directory. How to check what directory you are in? You can use this command called pwd. Let me zoom in a little bit. I'm in the root directory because I'm the root user of the system. How you can check that? You can always ask Linux, who am I? It will tell you that who you are. I'm the root. Root is the most authenticated user in this system. Okay, in a Linux system, being root is equivalent to being the administrative user. Okay. Now, if I want to check what kind of files I have in this particular directory in root, I can do ls, that is short for list. pwd is short for present working directory. It tells you what directory you are working in right now in terminal. ls is short for list. It shows you like what kind of files and folders you have in that particular directory. We have ch tools, downloads, desktop, documents, pictures, template, like whatever that consists in that particular directory, it will show you that. There are sometimes hidden files in Linux. Okay, we are not going to go into in depth of them, what they do, what are the purpose, but to see those hidden files, you can always do ls-a. Now this hyphen, you can consider this as like a additional plugin, a switch I like to call it, which is giving it an additional functionality. When you normally do ls, it just shows you the list by default. But when I add this particular plugin, -a, this plugin is to show all. Right, it shows all the files. Let that be hidden files as well. So -a shows all the files, okay? Or you can do -la, it's the same thing, list all basically. Okay, now you see it is listing all of them. Not just like particular folders, but like all of them. So yeah, these dot files, you see, they were hidden earlier when I did ls, but now with -a, it is showing me all of them. Now I am in the root directory as I already checked here. What if I want to change my directory and I want to go into desktop, right? If I want to go in there, I want to change my directory. So the command I'll be executing is cd, that is short for change directory. And I'll give the name of the directory I want to change to, that is desktop, and I'm going to press enter. And if I confirm, you can see it shows here desktop, but if I want to check my present working directory, I can always do pwd. It will tell me I'm in root directory. Root is the base folder and directory is the subfolder I just changed myself into. So yeah, that's how changing the directory works. If I want to see what files are here, I can do ls. Actually, there is nothing, so it's not going to show you anything. So my desktop is like empty, you can see. How about we create a new folder? It's very simple. You just have to make a folder, make a directory as we call it. The command is going to be mkdir, okay? mkdir is short for make directory. So when I do type this command, I have to give the name of a directory. I want to create a directory called Akash, and you can see it created a directory here as well. In the real time you can see that folder Akash, right? If I want to remove a directory, it's very simple. It's going to be rmdir, that's short for remove directory, and I'm going to remove. You can see it's gone from the desktop, it's gone, right? So that's how make and remove directory works, mkdir and rmdir. Okay, now this was for a directory. Let's talk about how to create a file. The simple command of creating a file is called touch. Okay, touch is a command that creates a file for you. You can actually give any extension of the file. Let's say if I want to create simple.txt. Oops, my bad. You see, it created simple.txt for me. I can also create simple.py, like a Python extension. It created that as well. I can literally give any extension, it will create that one for me, okay? So touch is used for file creation, okay, if you want to create a file. If I want to remove a file, I'm going to use rm. Rm is short for remove, and I want to remove the Python file. I just want a txt.py. This is how you execute it. I press enter and it removed it for me. So yeah, for removing folder, we have to specify rmdir, but for removing a file, we can simply use rm. It will work, right? So that's how you add a file, create a file, remove the files, right? Let's talk about copying and pasting. You can, if you're using a graphical user interface, you can always make a right click and copy and paste with your keyboard shortcuts as well. But how do you actually work when you are not using a GUI? When you're using a CLI? that is short for command line interface. So when we're using CLI, we are going to use terminal completely, and I'm going to tell you the commands for that as well. We have a file here, simple.txt. I want to remove it, and I want to transfer from desktop to documents. Okay, I want to transfer to documents, and I want to copy it. I don't want to move it. I want to copy this. Like I want this to be here and in documents as well. So the command is going to be cp, that is short for copy. I'm going to give the file name that I want to move, that is simple.txt, and then I'll give the destination location where I want to actually move it. I want to move it to documents. It's going to be in root documents. That's the proper location, the exact destination that where I want to copy it. Okay, so I got to give the exact destination. When I press enter, it copied it there as well. If you wanted me to show, I'll show you. I'm going to change to the directory. I'm going to go back one directory with the help of these two dots that denotes one directory back. You see pwd. Now I'm in root. Now I'm going to go into documents. You see I have simple.txt here as well. If I see all details, you can see it was just created a few seconds ago. Okay, all right, cool. So this is how you copy it. Okay, but what if I want to move from documents and I want to move it to downloads? If I want to move from point A to point B, that means cut and paste basically. So command is going to be mv simple.txt, and I want to move it to let's give the complete location, root downloads. Okay, this is where I want to move it. I press enter and I check. It's not anymore in documents. I'll go back and I'll go in downloads. You see simple.txt. You can ignore the other files, but this is the file that we were looking for. Okay, alright then. So this is how basic commands work in Linux. These are some of the commands that I just showed you. There are more commands. I'm going to tell them as well. We just talked about the simple.txt. Now the thing is that I have already created this file simple.txt, but I want to edit this file. I want to add some text to it. So how am I going to do it? I'm going to use an editor. It's called Nano. Nano is a CLI based editor in Linux which can edit any file with any format except for media files. It can edit any file. Okay, by media files I mean JPG, PNGs, MP4, not them actually, but it can edit files that are editable. For example, we have JSON files, it can edit that, TXT of course. So I'm going to show you an example with TXT. You guys must be thinking like how an editor will look like in CLI, right? How Notepad would look like without a graphical user interface. So this is how it's gonna look. You see, it's like a plain empty canvas for you. You can type anything in here. At the bottom, there are some shortcuts that are shown for your help. I'm gonna tell you some shortcuts how to use them. So I want to add, like, my name is Akash. Oh. It's not taken my input properly. Oh, there we go. Alright, my name is Akash. This is something I added. Now, if I want to save this file, I have to do Control O. Control O, O as an ostrich. So Control O is basically going to proceed to write an output for this particular file, okay? So it's going to create an output file. It's asking me at the bottom that if I want to give the right file name as simple.txt. If that's a name I want to give. I can change it though, but I don't want to change it, so I'm going to keep it this way. I can press enter and it's done. Now how do hell I get out of it? So it's simple. You do Control X. When you do Control X, it will just exit you out of this notepad. Okay. So now if I check what is in my simple.txt, but wait, we haven't learned that yet, how to check it. So there's this command called cat. Cat is short for concatenate. If you are from chemistry background, you might have heard of this term called concatenation. If not, then you can always use Google. So basically, cat is short for concatenate, and this command basically will tell you the content of any kind of file format. So if there is a Python file, if it's a Java file, it's a text file, whatsoever file type you have, it can show you the content without executing the file, okay? So if you don't want to execute, you want to see what is the content of the file, you can actually see it with the help of cat. So I'm going to see for simple.txt, right? Alright then. So the content is my name is Akash Sharma. So it actually edited that thing, whatever I typed into this file. And I did that without the help of any, generic graphical user interface tools. I'm doing it all with the help of CLI. Trust me, if you are getting into cybersecurity, you need to make sure that you get used to CLI as much as you can, because you should not be, always depending on the graphical user tools, because there will be certain conditions wherein you'll be working with the servers and remote machines, and you will only be having a CLI based connection. So you should not be, relying too much on the GUI interface. You must be, getting good with the CLI as well. So these are some very basic commands, like how you are actually communicating with the system, how you are working, how you are creating files, and just doing stuff. So Nano is one of the editor. There are other editors, gedit, there is Vim, but they are really complex. Gedit is simple, but Vim is very complex to understand for a beginner. So let's go with Nano, but I will definitely recommend you should at some point of time go for Vim as well. All right. So let's say if I edit this file a little bit more, my alias name is terabyte. I live in Delhi. That's where I live. Delhi for my foreign friends is in India, and I am a cyber security professional. Alright, so these are a few sentences that I added, and I am going to save it. I'm going to exit, okay? Now, if I want to fetch a particular string of characters from my text file, okay? I said a lot of big words. I'm going to say it again. If I want to fetch a particular string of characters from my text file, there is a certain command for that as well, right? I want to grab a particular string. So this command is known as grep, G-R-E-P. How do we use it? There is a specific way of using it. I'm showing you very fundamental, but there's a lot more you can do with grep. So if I am doing cat for simple.txt, I can do grep terabyte, or I can do grep, let's say, India, and it will grab that particular string instance from this particular file and will show me in the output. Before I do that, let's do a simple cat without any other extension. It will show me all the content. Okay, these are only 4 lines. Let's say your text file have 400 lines and you want that particular instance of strings. So we can use grep for that. We can use grep to grab certain strings that we want to fetch from a particular text file or any other file actually. So how are we going to use it? It's grep India. So you see it highlighted India for me as well, and it fetched that particular instance where this particular string was existing. Okay, so this is how grep works. Grep is a very good utility, and if you know how to use it properly, if you master it, you can actually use Linux very efficiently. So with practice and with experiments, the more you use it, the more you're gonna know it. So yeah, that's what actually greps do in a nutshell, but you can do a lot more. All right. Now, you must also be wondering that at some instances I'm typing really fast and I don't even need to type the complete words and I can just autofill it. So, autofilling is one of the features in Linux. We do it with the tab key on the keyboard. You must be having a tab key above your caps lock key. So that tab key basically autofill that particular word for you, but there are some conditions you need to understand. I'll explain you what I mean when I say that. I'm going to create a new file called let's take a big name, I don't know why this came to mind. Let's say prant protein box dot txt, okay? This is the file name. So I am of course not going to type this big name all the time, okay? Let's say if I want to remove this file, I need to type this big name all over again. I don't need to do that actually. What I can do is I can just type the initials and I can press tab, which will autocomplete that particular string which is already existing. Let's say if I don't type the string properly, if I type PRIS, if I press tab, it's not gonna work. The reason is because there is no such string existing in this particular directory which start with PRIS, so it's not gonna autocomplete that for me. But if I type SIM, it will complete that for me because it already exists there. So that's the simple logic. There's, let's say if I want to go into templates, I'm gonna CD TEM and I'm gonna press tab here, and we'll see it completed that for me automatically. But again, I'm gonna give you another condition here. Let's say there are two folders, documents and downloads. Both are starting from DO. Okay, so if I do DO and I press tab, it's going to show me two options, that if you want to go into DOC documents or if you want to go DOW downloads. Okay, so I need to specify it a bit more further so that it can understand how to autocomplete more efficiently, because DO is having two different permutations. So I need to specify DOC and then press tab so it will complete to documents. If I do it DOW and press tab, it goes to downloads. So that's how you have to actually understand using tab functionality. Again, the more you're going to use it, the more you're going to understand. So yeah, that's all based on your practice. So that was another functionality that will help you using Linux. Let me just explain you quickly the user groups as well. So in Linux, there are different user types. Okay, we have a root user, we have a normal user, and then we have a guest user. So they have different permissions. Okay, we have read, write, and execute, RWX. For every file, there are three permissions that are defined. So let me show you an example here. I'm gonna create a new file for you. Let's name this file permission.py. I'm gonna make a Python file here. Okay, so we have this file permission.py. If I want to check the complete details, I'm gonna ask listing to list all the details, LA. I'm gonna press enter. It is listing me all the information. Let me tell you how to read this information. This right here is the permission, right? These are the permissions that are assigned to a particular file. If there is a D in the beginning, that means it's a directory, that these permissions are assigned to a particular directory. If it is blank, that means it is a file type. So you have to consider file types and directories separately. Okay. Now we have two files, chmod.jpg, and then there is this permission.py. Let's focus on permission.py right now. Okay. So the permissions that are given to this particular file is RW, R, and R. Let me tell you how to read this permission as well. Let me open a notepad real quick. I'm going to use a graphical one for your understanding. Okay. So as I told you, there are three user types: root, normal user, and then there is a guest. For every user, for all the files, you have three type of permissions. There is read, write, and execute. Similar goes for root, read, write, and execute, and similar for guest, read, write, and execute. Same permissions for all three of them. Okay. For this particular file, the root user, the main user, is having the read and write permission, not the execution permission. That means X is missing. R and W, X is missing. For normal user, only read permission is given, and for guest as well, only read permission is given. So this is how this matrix can be understood, that this is the matrix for three different user types and three different permissions. Now I'm also going to tell you how to change these permissions. Okay, so we have read, write, we don't have execute permission, but I'm going to give an execute permission to this user. Before we go into that, you need to see this particular image that I'm going to show you. Images actually can only be seen with the graphical user interface, so I have no option but to use it. So don't mind me doing that. Okay, so this is the image. This table basically shows you the permission types for Linux and how to change them and how to, interoperate them. Okay, so I'm assuming here that if you are getting into computer science, you must be understanding the binary and hexadecimal conversions and octal conversions. If not, then you should basically clear out your fundamentals. That's a very basic thing that you need to learn when you are getting into computer operations, okay? Now, so you see, for every kind of permission type, the file mode are basically the permissions that are given to a particular file type. For every permission type, there is a certain kind of binary notation, like 001 is for execution, for write 010, and for every binary annotation, there is a octal conversion for that as well. So here, 0 is 000, 1 is 001, octal 2 is 010. This is a very basic conversion type. This is how octal is converted into binary. If you don't know it, you should learn these conversions seriously. But yeah, these are 7 octal numbers that are converted into binaries. Why 7? If you are asking me, because this is the maximum number of permutation of permissions can a file can ever get. So what I mean by that is a file can only have 3 type permissions, right? R, W, and X. So there can only be 7 permutations for every single permission that is assigned in a unique state to a particular file type. You will understand it when I show you the practical, okay? For this type of permission where only read and write is allocated, this type of octal assignment can be done, that is number 6. So let me write number 6 here for your understanding, okay? Right. For this, for only R, the allocation is 4, 4, so on and so forth, 4, okay? So 644. So this is a combination that is assigned. Now when we talk about changing a particular permission, there is a utility in Linux that we use is called chmod. Chmod, short for change and modify, okay? Chmod. This utility basically changes and modifies the permission types for different files. I'll tell you how to use it. Let me make this clear. Okay. So just to make it clear, we are going to do it for permission.py. The current permissions given to it is these. And to the root user, I'm going to allow the execution permission as well. As of now, it is not available. I'm going to add it myself. Add it right now, real time. I'm going to leave these two as it is, just the way they are, not going to change or going to do anything to them. So from this permission type rw hyphen, I want to change it to rwx, that is 7. So I want to convert this 6 into 7. So the complete permission matrix will be 644, and I'm going to convert it into 744. Okay, so it's very simple. I just want to type chmod 744 and then the file name that I want to change the permissions for, permission.py. Very simple. This number here is just an annotation to the matrix I want to create, and this can be referred by this table. Again, I'm gonna keep repeating this maybe in the whole session, that the more you use it, the more you know it, because this table is not something that you refer all the time. Okay, after some time of usage, you will automatically remember it, because it's all basic conversion that you're doing. It's nothing much. It's just simple octal to binary conversion. That's all what you're doing. So here I'm gonna do 744. That is for RWX, for root, R for read permission for user, and read permission for guest. All right. I press enter, and yeah, it's done. Earlier, if you see, the permission was having this type of permission matrix. Now it's having this one. The execution permission is also provided now. So that's how you do it. That's how you use chmod basically to convert permissions for a particular file type. If I want to allocate everyone the same permission as root, I'm going to do chmod 777 permission.py. Now everyone is having the same permissions. You can see RWX for all of them. So this is how you change permissions in Linux. This is how you can modify them, and this is the table that you might need to refer. You can always search on Google for chmod table. You will always find it in the images section on the very top. It's a very common table used by everyone. So yeah, that was chmod, and that is how you change permissions. So this was all for this small demonstration for Linux. how to use it, the basic commands, and what exactly Linux looks like, how it feels to work in it. This was Kali Linux that I was using. You can be using any kind of Linux. These are some of the basic commands that works on all of them. It's not like everyone have a different one, but because the base system is Linux, so these are gonna work. So now let's proceed further with our rest of the curriculum, that is network security. So let's proceed further. So after the practicals of Linux and how to use it, let's proceed further with the curriculum of networking security, okay? So in networking security, we are going to talk about firewalls. What is a firewall? A firewall is a network security device that analyzes incoming and outgoing network traffic and determines whatever specific traffic should be allowed or blocked based on a set of security rules. So in a firewall, basically, there are rule sets that are defined, which make sure that what kind of data transaction is done, what kind of data packets are allowed and blocked, and if they are blocked, what are the conditions. You can actually put conditions there as well. So that's a firewall. This is basically a line of defense for you, which is going to work for you and make sure the security policy is always maintained. There are different types of firewalls as well. I'm going to explain them as well, okay? But before I explain, let's understand what is the main goal behind designing a firewall, okay? The firewall must let all traffic to pass from inside to the outside and vice versa. There should not be a hindrance that a firewall creates itself. I mean, you can block some packets, but the firewall must not be doing that by own and creating a problem, creating a hindrance in the flow of traffic. There should always be a smooth maintenance of it, of course. Only permitted traffic will be allowed to pass as stated by the local security policy. Whatever policy you define, only the permitted traffic should be there. Let's say only FTP packet should be there, but SSH should be blocked or that kind of stuff. You can actually block different kind of services and stuff like that. It is immune to penetration. That is the most important thing. It's like wearing a mask, and you should make sure that it keeps you safe, right? So that's your first line of defense. So firewall should also be immune to any kind of penetration. It should not be hackable, as you say in a common layman term, okay? First, we're going to discuss about network-based firewall. So network-based firewall is a network device that filters traffic going from internet to secure LAN and vice versa. So network-based firewalls are hardware-based firewalls, okay? And they work on a complete network, and they make sure like whatever kind of data transaction is taking place on a secured LAN through the internet, it makes sure to implement whatever rule sets you have defined for the firewall, and it does not work on a particular single system but on the complete throughout the whole network, okay? Whatever device consists in your network. Here it mentions it can make decisions throughout the traffic. This decision means like whatever kind of implementations that we have defined in the firewall rule set. So it can actually make these kind of decisions or computations throughout the network, like throughout the traffic, like whatever kind of traffic is going on in your network, it can actually implement decision on all of it. If there is a stream of, let's say, 20,000 packets, it can actually filter those as well. So that's how good a network based firewall could be. Although for larger enterprises it's a cheap option because it doesn't really cost much, but it is a really good line of defense, and it is not that movable, like it's not that mobile. You have to actually set up a device like that. There is this thing called UTMs, unified threat mechanisms. So these mechanisms basically helps you set up these kind of network based firewall rule sets, okay? Next we have is host based firewall. Host based firewall or software based firewall, okay? I'll explain you what. So host based firewall is a firewall installed on each server that controls incoming and outgoing network traffic and determines where to allow into a particular device. So this can be installed on your computers, your phones, your servers, systems, whatsoever you have. So this host-based firewall works on a particular endpoint device. You can say on an endpoint device, right? So host-based firewall contain filtering rules which can be tailored to the host environment. It provides protection which is independent of the topology. Like no matter what network connection you're connected to, this is going to specify to your host, okay? Like let's say I have a laptop and I have a desktop computer, I have a cell phone, I have an iPad or whatsoever I have. I can actually design firewalls specified to those hosts. devices. Okay, I don't need to define a single standard network based firewall for that particular network. I can actually define on them host as well. So this is a basic difference between them. Host based firewall is software based firewall. If I talk about a large enterprise, it is a costly solution, to be honest, because it depends on what manufacturer you're buying it from. And there are free ones too, but you know the drill, the free doesn't really work good. But yeah, anyway, if I give a very layman term example, you can say antiviruses. That's how you can understand that, right? It's a very layman example, but it will give you the explanation, right? So if your personal computer is connected with the internet, it basically protects it. That's why the wall is there. Wall is like a line of defense. That's why we use firewall. All right, so that's host-based firewall for you. The final type of firewall that we use is called the web application. Now, if you have ever came across the term bug bounties, if you're getting into bug bounties, you should be understanding and you will be working a lot with web application based firewalls, okay? These are some rule sets that are defined on a web application, on the websites, basically. So WAF, as we call it short, is defined as a security policy enforcement point positioned between a web application and the client endpoint. That means if you're a client and there is a website that you're trying to connect with a server, it basically adds a layer of security between these two endpoints, the user and the server, so that the whatever data transaction you're doing, it is protected. So you see, like in this demonstration, in this illustration here, it is defined like some non-HTTP attack is standard packet firewall and web application firewall. If there is a non-HTTP attack, HTTP is short for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. This is like a protocol to transfer your data, right? A non-HTTP attack can be, defended with a standard packet firewall, but with a WAF, you can also defend a HTTP attack as well. And only a legitimate data packet will only be able to penetrate to this firewall. Will be allowed, actually, not penetrate, will only be allowed. So this is how you can actually understand it. Okay, this feature can be implemented in either software or hardware and run on a appliance device or standard server with a common operating system. It can be used as a standalone device or as a part of a larger network. Now, WAFs can be implemented in any format, right? So that's how mobile and scalable it is. There are different kind of WAFs that are available, and once you are in this domain, once you are working, especially in bug bounties, if you're interested and if you're going to find some vulnerabilities in web application especially, you will be dealing a lot with WAFs. So there are a few types of firewalls. When we talk about network security, there is a lot more plethora of information that I can actually share for hours and hours on network security itself. But I was just giving you a brief demonstration of what kind of things, what components are there basically in network security. There's a lot more, lot many tools, thousands of practicals maybe, which I can show and demonstrate. But for this lecture, this much will be plenty. So we have reached to the end of this lecture 1. But I want you to understand that why am I teaching you all this? Why am I spending time and making a video about it? So basically, I have 5 years of experience in the same domain. I have worked in multiple companies and I have worked on many positions, and I have also led a team of big number of candidates, and I have already mentored 150 plus candidates so far in my journey. And I have seen first-handedly their pain points. I've seen where they face problems, where they lack, where they need to grow, and how I can help them to grow as well. So this training program is basically just an initiative to train students in the CEH curriculum. And I'm also willing to additionally train them in the professional skill set so that they can grow and learn efficiently in the same domain thoroughly, right? They can actually grow not just from a skill point of view, but from a professional point of view as well. But also, why do you need to get into this CH training? You know that cyber attacks are always on a race 24/7. There's always a malware attack. There's always a ransomware attack that you have came across in the news these days, for sure. First and foremost, staff that is well trained in cybersecurity possess less of a risk to the overall security of the organization. If the staff, the employees of the companies are well trained, then definitely it possesses less risk to the company itself. that if they know how to use the technology, then definitely they are well trained and there won't be any more a liability, but a benefit to the company itself. Fewer risk means fewer financial losses due to cybercrime. So cyber criminals have a vendetta of course stealing your information, stealing your money, stealing your privacy. And if you are aware of cyber security rule sets and policies, you will be of course be able to secure yourself and your organization. We already have came across a lot of new technological developments in the last decade itself. I would also say in the last 5 years especially. And this is a never stopping graph. So the technology is always evolving. And to create this enhanced level of security, people need to be informed about the best practices in cybersecurity as well. So this curriculum of CEH basically introduces a very vast level of information in cybersecurity domain, what you need to know, how to implement, how to use, and also helps you understand the new coming technology in a very efficient manner. So enroll now for our live training program, and if you want to contact us for any other queries, you can contact on our social media handles @Byte Cyber Labs. You can connect with us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you want. You can also connect with our associates on our email address info@bytecyberlabs.com. Till then, hope to see you in our live training program as well. Stay safe, take care, and keep learning.